Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're stepping deep into the fog for a long, unsettling tour through Silent Hill's most disturbing moments. From its earliest cult rituals to the body horror nightmares of Silent Hill F, this is a true deep dive into the scenes that have haunted players for decades. If you're ready for some nightmare fuel, hit that like button to help more horror fans find this video. And let me know down in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing our late night Silent Hill crew check in from all over. So get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's start. Heather's Godbirth, Silent Hill 3. Among all of Silent Hill's disturbing imagery, few scenes rival the horror of Heather's forced godbirth in Silent Hill 3. Throughout the game, Claudia and the cult manipulate Heather, insisting she carries the seed of their god within her, a continuation of Alessa's torment. For most of the story, this remains a looming threat, but in one of the game's most unsettling sequences, that threat becomes reality. Heather collapses in pain, convulsing as something inside her begins to move. Her skin pales, her body shakes, and she vomits a bloody, fleshy mass, the embryo of the god the cult has been desperate to summon. It's not framed as a triumphant ritual, it's shown as grotesque violation. Heather, still conscious, retches and cries, left in shock at what her body has been forced to expel. The scene is disturbing not just for the gore, but for the layers of meaning. It's a metaphor for loss of control, for a body twisted into something it was never meant to be. The imagery draws on themes of forced birth, medical trauma, and abuse, made worse by the fact that Heather is still a teenager, bearing the curse placed on Alessa years before. What follows when Claudia consumes the embryo to try to birth the god herself only adds to the nightmare, but it's Heather's moment of collapse that sticks with players. It's raw, invasive, and utterly inescapable. Silent Hill doesn't just haunt the mind, it uses the body as its canvas. And here, the result is one of the most disturbing scenes in survival horror. PT's crying fetus in the sink. When PT was released as a playable teaser, few expected it to deliver one of the most infamous, disturbing moments in gaming, the crying fetus in the bathroom sink. At first, the locked bathroom teases curiosity, but once players finally push the door open, the image waiting inside is unforgettable. A cracked porcelain sink cradles a malformed fetus, raw, bloodied, and twitching. Its cries echo through the small room, high-pitched wails layered with wet, gurgling breaths. What makes this scene so disturbing isn't just the grotesque design of the fetus, it's the way the game frames the encounter. The camera forces players to look down into the sink, trapping them with the sound of relentless sobbing. You can't comfort it, can't turn away, can't change what you're seeing. The helplessness becomes the horror. Theories exploded after release. Some believe the fetus represented a murdered child, tying into the implied domestic abuse in the teaser's fragmented narrative. Others connected it to Silent Hill's recurring themes of forced birth and corrupted innocence, echoing Alessa and Heather's fates. In either case, the bathroom becomes more than a jump scare. It's a symbolic chamber of grief, guilt, and violation. The crying fetus is burned into player memory because it strips horror to its most primal elements, the suffering of a newborn, placed in a space meant for cleansing but used for torment instead. It's a single image, but it carries the weight of an entire nightmare, showing how Silent Hill doesn't need monsters with weapons to disturb. It only needs what should have been innocent, twisted beyond recognition. Alessa's immolation. One of the most haunting moments across the Silent Hill franchise is the immolation of Alessa Gillespie, a moment that forms the very core of the series' horror and tragedy. In Silent Hill 1, Alessa is raised by the cult, tortured, and finally consumed in flames in the ritual chamber, her body burning as she wills half her soul into Cheryl. That scene echoes through every game that follows. What makes it so disturbing is how it blends physical pain with spiritual sacrifice. The fire isn't just violence, it's conditional ritual. Flames strip flesh, but also strip meaning. In the game's lore, this burning is meant to purify, to birth divinity. But for Alessa, it becomes a crucible. The visuals are stark, flesh fused to metal, smoke swallowing symbols, her screams half human, half prayer. It's one of the few moments where Silent Hill shows suffering in full spectrum, body, soul, psyche. Across later entries, Alessa's burning is repeated not as meme or reference, but as a ritual echo. Her suffering replays in Heather's nightmares, in cult altars, in shadowy silhouettes. It becomes the signature trauma the town rests on. Without that fire, there is no Cheryl, no cult, no God attempt. The series never tries to soften it. In Silent Hill's mythology, Alessa's immolation is not a past event. It remains a stove that still burns. When we walk these haunted streets, every warped hospital room or scorched hallway owes its pain to that nexus of flame. The cult tried to destroy her. The town refused to forget. Lisa Garland's breakdown. If Alessa's fire is the series' primal wound, then Lisa Garland's breakdown in Silent Hill 1 is its cruelest personal tragedy. Lisa begins as a sympathetic figure, a nurse who seems to genuinely care for Alessa, someone who tried to shield her from the cult's worst abuses. When Harry meets her, she appears confused but warm, a fragile thread of humanity in the nightmare. But Silent Hill doesn't let kindness survive. In one of the game's most unforgettable cutscenes, Lisa realizes the truth. She's been dead all along. Her voice trembles as she clutches her head, recounting how she can't stop the bleeding and begging Harry not to leave her alone. Her face shifts, blood pouring from her nose and eyes, staining her nurse's uniform. The breakdown spirals quickly. Lisa sobs. She panics. Then she lunges toward Harry, desperate for connection. But Harry recoils, locking her out. The horror here isn't about monsters with claws or fangs. It's about the slow destruction of self-awareness. Lisa isn't attacked from outside. Her mind caves in on itself, collapsing under the weight of what Silent Hill forces her to remember. In that moment, she's not just a ghost. She's every victim who realizes too late that the town has already claimed them. What makes Lisa's breakdown so disturbing is how intimate it feels. We don't watch a villain punished or a stranger torn apart. We watch someone kind, someone we wanted to trust, unravel into blood and grief. Silent Hill spares no one, not even the gentle souls. Hanging corpses in Midwitch School. When players first step into Midwitch Elementary School in Silent Hill 1, they expect shadows and static, maybe some monsters down a hallway. What they don't expect are the hanging corpses, swaying gently from the ceiling in the otherworld version of the school. It's one of the earliest signs that Silent Hill isn't just going to scare with enemies, it's going to scar with imagery. The bodies themselves are crude in the original graphics, but that's part of what makes them work. Their blocky forms dangle, featureless, reduced to shapes that suggest humanity without confirming it. Are they children, teachers, ritual victims? The game never answers. They are simply there, silent witnesses to a place where innocence has been devoured. For many fans, this is the first moment they realize the town's nightmare isn't confined to Alessa or to the cult. It bleeds into ordinary spaces. Schools are supposed to be safe, familiar, protective. Instead, Midwitch becomes a gallery of suffering, its classrooms echoing with shrieks and whispers, its ceilings turned into gallows. The disturbing part isn't only visual, it's symbolic. Alessa's pain began in these classrooms where she was bullied, mocked, and beaten. The corpses could be her revenge, or her memories, or the town punishing her tormentors. Or they might not be people at all, just representations of abuse and death stretched into physical form. Silent Hill thrives on that ambiguity. Walking through Midwich, players don't just see bodies. They see what it means when a child's trauma rewrites the world, and it's only the beginning. Angela's staircase of fire. Few moments in Silent Hill 2 are as harrowing as Angela Orozco's final scene on the staircase, engulfed in flames. By the time James encounters her here, players already know her story. A life marked by abuse at the hands of her father and brother, years of torment that the town transforms into monsters like the abstract daddy. But it's this scene, near the end, that makes Angela's suffering unforgettable. The stairs themselves descend into a hallway of fire, walls glowing with heat, the air shimmering with ash. For James, the flames don't burn. He walks the steps without harm, but Angela recoils as if the fire is consuming her. She tells James, "For me, it's always like this." That single line delivers Silent Hill's cruel truth. Angela doesn't get to escape her trauma. The fire is her reality, and it will never go out. What makes this moment disturbing isn't gore or sudden shocks. It's the way the game conveys endless psychological torment through a single piece of imagery. For Angela, every step is pain, every room is burning. The town doesn't let her heal. It locks her in a world where her abuse never ended. The encounter ends ambiguously. Angela climbs into the flames, vanishing as James looks on. Whether she dies there or simply dissolves into the nightmare doesn't matter. What matters is the implication. Angela's otherworld is eternal fire, and she has no way out. It's one of Silent Hill's most haunting statements, that some scars don't fade, they only burn hotter. Abstract daddy confrontation. The abstract daddy fight in Silent Hill 2 remains one of the most disturbing boss encounters in gaming history. Unlike other monsters in the series, this one isn't born from James's psyche. It's Angela's. It manifests as a grotesque, bed-shaped mass with writhing human forms pressed together, echoing Angela's memories of abuse by her father and brother. The design alone unsettles, a suffocating frame of flesh and fabric, twisted limbs pinned in place, movements jerky and unnatural. The bed structure makes it obvious it's a prison of trauma, forcing Angela's worst experiences into physical form. The sound design makes it worse, with wet groans and labored movements suggesting something trapped inside, struggling to break free. What makes this confrontation so disturbing is the role James plays. Even though Abstract Daddy comes from Angela's past, James is the one who has to fight it. Angela isn't given the chance to battle her monster. Silent Hill makes the player do it for her. The town forces James, and by extension the player, into complicity. You kill Angela's abuser symbol because she cannot. After the fight, Angela doesn't thank James, she simply mutters, broken and hollow, still trapped in her reality. The battle doesn't fix anything, it's just another step in her spiral. This moment crystallizes what makes Silent Hill unique. The horror isn't about winning or losing against a monster. It's about realizing that some wounds are so deep, so personal, that even defeating the creature that represents them changes nothing. Angela will always carry her past, and Abstract Daddy is only a symptom. Maria's repeated deaths. In Silent Hill 2, few things unsettle more than the way Maria keeps dying, and then returning as if nothing happened. From the first execution at Pyramid Head's hands, to her collapse in the hospital, to the final chase through the labyrinth, her deaths pile up until they no longer shock. They disturb on a deeper level. At first, Maria feels like a companion. She laughs, flirts, and offers James connection in a place that otherwise isolates him. But Silent Hill weaponizes that bond. Every time Maria is taken from James, it feels like punishment, a grotesque repetition of Mary's death. The town is forcing James to watch his desire destroyed again and again until he can't ignore his guilt. The disturbing part isn't just the violence, it's Maria's indifference to her own mortality. After being slaughtered, she reappears with no memory of what happened, her tone playful, almost mocking. She acts alive, but she doesn't live. It's as though the town is recycling her body like a prop, a tool to keep James locked in his nightmare. By the time Maria's final death comes, the horror has shifted. It isn't about Pyramid Head or the spectacle of murder anymore. It's about the realization that Maria was never meant to survive. She exists to suffer and vanish, a cruel echo of what James did to Mary. Each repetition strips away her humanity until she's little more than a reminder that Silent Hill will never let him escape his crime. Maria's cycle of death is one of the series' most chilling devices. Not a single loss, but a ritual of loss repeated until the player can't stand to see it again. Eddie's freezer scene. In Silent Hill 2, the descent into Toluca prison and the labyrinth is already heavy, but one of the darkest moments comes earlier, Eddie's freezer scene. When James finds him in the meat locker, Eddie is surrounded by hanging carcasses, the air thick with decay and frost. The conversation that follows is disturbing not just for what Eddie says, but for how he says it. Eddie admits to killing a dog for mocking him, then casually shifts to killing people who laughed at him. His voice moves between denial and glee, a chilling portrait of someone unraveling under the town's influence. Silent Hill doesn't distort Eddie's crimes into symbolism the way it does for James or Angela. It lets him confess plainly in a room that amplifies the horror. The freezer, lined with slabs of meat, becomes a literal reflection of his mindset. Humans reduced to butchered animals, their lives meaningless. What makes this moment disturbing is its banality of evil. Eddie doesn't seem possessed or manipulated by the town. He just uses its nightmare rules as justification for his cruelty. While James faces monsters born of guilt, Eddie embraces murder as liberation, boasting that in Silent Hill no one can stop him. When James confronts him, the tension snaps into violence. Eddie's killings stop being stories and become reality, forcing James into battle. The freezer becomes a slaughterhouse, a place where laughter turned into screams, and Eddie no longer distinguishes between the two. The scene sticks because it strips away the supernatural and shows horror at its simplest. A man, cornered by insecurity, deciding that murder makes him free. Pyramid Head assaults. Few moments in Silent Hill 2 are as deeply disturbing as Pyramid Head's acts of sexual violence against the monsters. In one of the earliest encounters at the Woodside Apartments, James peers through the bars of a room and sees Pyramid Head forcing himself on a pair of mannequins, monsters already designed to embody warped sexuality. It's not just shocking imagery, it's a performance stage for James to witness. The horror here isn't about gore or a direct threat to the player, it's psychological, forcing James and us to watch something degrading, violent, and impossible to ignore. Pyramid Head isn't simply punishing James. He's reenacting the darkest corners of James's subconscious, mirroring his suppressed desires and guilt. The fact that it happens in silence without explanation makes it more unnerving, Later, Pyramid Head repeats this with a lying figure, again turning violence into an assault. These scenes draw a line between James's repressed sexuality, Mary's illness, and the twisted ways his psyche processes intimacy. Silent Hill externalizes his inner torment into acts of cruelty that disturb precisely because they're not for combat, but for theater. For players, these sequences remain some of the most infamous in survival horror. They're not jump scares or boss fights. They're spectacles of suffering designed to unsettle on a moral level. The mannequins, already uncanny with their double legs and missing faces, become props in a ritual of punishment, while Pyramid Head stands as the executioner James secretly believes he deserves. Silent Hill rarely shows violence this bluntly, which makes these scenes unforgettable. They're not there for shock value. They're there to force the player to sit with the same shame and horror James carries inside him. Hinako cutting off her arm in Silent Hill F. When Silent Hill F finally released, fans expected its trademark psychological horror. What they didn't expect was one of the most grotesque body horror moments in the series. Hinako sawing off her own arm as the infection spreads. Early in the story, Hinako becomes entangled in the strange fungal growths that twist flesh into flowers. The infection blooms across her skin, twisting her body until she makes the unthinkable choice. She severs her arm herself. The cutscene doesn't hide the act. It lingers on her desperation, the scrape of blade against bone, the sheer panic of trying to escape her own body. But the horror doesn't end there. Instead of salvation, the wound sprouts into something worse. A grotesque fox-like arm of fungus and bone, replacing what she lost. The moment captures Silent Hill's cruelty. Survival is impossible, because the cure only deepens the curse. What makes this scene especially disturbing is the intimacy of the violence. Unlike monsters tearing at flesh, this is self-inflicted. Hinako knows what's happening, understands her body no longer belongs to her, and still acts in a futile attempt to take back control. It's tragedy and terror woven together, made worse by the surreal image of flowers blooming where human tissue should be. Players and reviewers alike singled this out as Silent Hill F's defining moment of horror. A statement that the franchise has embraced full-on body corruption, showing how Silent Hill doesn't just prey on the mind, but rewrites the body in ways that are impossible to look away from. Haunted Wheelchair Corridor, Silent Hill 3. In Silent Hill 3, Heather navigates plenty of unsettling spaces, but few stick with players like the Haunted Wheelchair Corridor. It's a narrow hospital hallway, dimly lit, with a wheelchair sitting at the far end. At first glance, it seems harmless, just another piece of medical equipment abandoned in the nightmare. But as Heather approaches, the soundscape shifts. The chair screeches across the floor, metal against tile, with no one pushing it. The sound cuts sharp through the silence, echoing off the walls. The moment is disturbing precisely because nothing else happens. The chair doesn't attack, it doesn't transform. It simply moves on its own, possessed by the same force that twists the entire hospital. That restraint is what makes it so effective. The horror is psychological, not mechanical, a reminder that even the most mundane objects aren't safe. For fans, the haunted wheelchair has become one of the most iconic images of Silent Hill 3. It doesn't rely on gore or grotesque monsters. It weaponizes the ordinary. Wheelchairs are supposed to symbolize care and mobility, yet here they're twisted into a reminder of helplessness and confinement, echoing Alessa's long hospitalization. The sequence also builds dread for the player. If a wheelchair can move on its own, what else in the hospital might come alive? It turns the entire space into a trap, making players fear not just what's around the corner, but what might suddenly stir behind them. This scene proves Silent Hill doesn't need jump scares to disturb. A single object, animated by unseen trauma, is enough to leave players deeply unsettled. The Mirror Room, Silent Hill 3. The Mirror Room in Silent Hill 3 is one of the most infamous moments in the series because it weaponizes stillness, reflection, and helplessness all at once. On the surface, the room looks ordinary, a tiled clinic with a giant wall-length mirror. Nothing seems unusual when Heather steps inside, until the reflection begins to move differently. At first, the mirrored room subtly distorts, a shadow flickers, the lighting bends, then the reflection starts to rot. Dark stains spread across the mirrored version of the room, crawling up the walls like a living infection. Soon Heather's reflection itself begins to blacken, her image trapped as if her very soul is being consumed. The real room stays clean, but the mirror insists that corruption is inevitable. The most disturbing part? The player has no control. You can't fight, you can't stop it, and the door won't open until the scene is finished. All you can do is watch Heather's reflection decay while she remains helpless on your side of the glass. It's pure psychological terror, Silent Hill proving that your agency doesn't matter here. Symbolically, the mirror room ties back to Heather's dual nature, part herself, part Alessa, always carrying the shadow of the cult's plans inside her. The reflection might not just be a trick of the other world, it could be Heather glimpsing the fate she's meant to suffer if the god inside her takes over. For many players, the mirror room is the moment that cemented Silent Hill 3 as more than a continuation of the story. It's a showcase of how horror can devastate without monsters or blood, simply by forcing you to watch your identity corrode. Parents boss fight Silent Hill F. One of the standout horrors in Silent Hill F is the grotesque parents boss fight, a sequence that turns family into a weapon. In this battle, Hinako faces monstrous forms of her father and mother, fused into nightmare creatures that lash out with blade-like limbs and tentacles made of flesh and fungus. What begins as a confrontation rooted in family trauma escalates into full-on body horror, staged in Silent Hill's new fungal aesthetic. The father figure looms tall and overpowering, wielding grotesque arms that resemble both weapons and restraints, as if designed to crush and control. The mother form is no less terrifying, warped into a parasitic shape, suffocating in her presence. Together they trap Hinako in a cycle of torment, their grotesque designs echoing the suffocating expectations and abuse she endured in life. What makes this fight especially disturbing isn't just the visual design, it's the implication that these aren't random monsters. They are Hinako's parents, resurrected and corrupted by the town, turned into avatars of her trauma. To survive, the player must literally destroy the twisted echoes of her family. It's Silent Hill's cruelty in its purest form, forcing victims to confront the very people who hurt them, only now as inhuman monstrosities. Fans have described the parents' boss as one of the most unsettling sequences in Silent Hill F, not just for its grotesque spectacle, but for its psychological weight. In true Silent Hill fashion, family bonds are twisted into chains, and breaking them comes at a cost that feels as painful as it looks. The room's chained corpses, Silent Hill 4. In Silent Hill 4, the room, Henry's apartment, gradually shifts from a familiar safe space into something suffocating and hostile. Among the most disturbing visuals in the game are the chained corpses discovered during Walter Sullivan's ritual killings. Unlike traditional monsters, these bodies don't attack or chase. They simply hang, bound in place, suspended between life and death. The imagery is stark. naked, twisted figures locked into metal restraints, their mouths sometimes open in frozen screams. Their placement isn't random either. They appear in key areas connected to Walter's victims, serving as grotesque reminders of the lives he ended. Each one represents another step in the 21 sacraments, his attempt to sanctify apartment 302 with murder. What makes this moment especially disturbing is its emotional resonance. You aren't battling faceless creatures. You're staring at the aftermath of human beings reduced to ritual props. The chains don't just bind their bodies, they symbolize Silent Hill's larger theme of captivity. People trapped by trauma, guilt, or belief systems they can't escape. For Henry, it's another reminder that the nightmare is intruding even into the supposed safety of his home. The corpses also echo the town's obsession with ritual sacrifice. Their stillness suggests permanence. Walter didn't just kill them, he displayed them, locked them into the fabric of the nightmare. The horror comes not from fear of attack, but from the suffocating knowledge that Silent Hill isn't only a place of monsters, it's a graveyard, endlessly decorated with reminders of suffering. The chained corpses are proof that in Silent Hill, death isn't an end. It's a display, and one you can't look away from. Walter's child victim backstory, Silent Hill 4. Walter Sullivan's story in Silent Hill 4. The room is already horrifying, but what makes it deeply disturbing is the way the game slowly reveals his childhood as a victim. Walter wasn't born a killer. He was created through neglect, indoctrination, and abuse at the hands of the cult. His life begins at the Wish House Orphanage, a place that should have been safe, but instead served as a front for the Order's experiments. There, Walter was taught that apartment 302 was his mother, a cruel manipulation that twisted his understanding of family and love. While other children endured indoctrination, Walter was singled out, molded into a vessel for the cult's rituals. As he grew older, that conditioning transformed into obsession. His killings, framed as the 21 sacraments were not random acts of violence. They were the warped fulfillment of what the Order planted in him as a child. The disturbing part isn't just Walter's brutality, it's the way the game forces players to see him as both villain and victim. The flashbacks and documents describing his childhood show a boy abandoned, desperate for connection, and exploited until his innocence was erased. By the time players face him as the story's antagonist, the tragedy of his past lingers. He isn't a monster born. He's a child weaponized by a system of cruelty. This backstory unsettles because it reframes Silent Hill's horror from supernatural forces to real human abuse. Walter's entire life is proof that the town doesn't only prey on guilt, it manufactures monsters out of children, then unleashes them on the world. Eileen's possession deterioration, Silent Hill 4. Eileen Galvin begins Silent Hill 4, the room as Henry's only ally, a neighbor caught up in the nightmare by accident. But as the game progresses, she becomes one of its most disturbing symbols, a victim slowly consumed by possession. After Walter's attack, Eileen is left injured, and the wound becomes a channel for the cult's influence. What follows is one of Silent Hill's most unsettling transformations, not a sudden monster reveal, but a slow deterioration you can watch in real time. As the game continues, Eileen's body and behavior worsen. She walks with a limp, her skin grows pale, and strange markings appear, signs that Walter's ritual is taking hold. Her dialogue shifts too, sometimes slurred, sometimes filled with phrases that don't sound like her own thoughts. The game ties her condition to player behavior. The more damage and neglect she suffers, the deeper the possession sets in, leading toward darker endings. The disturbing aspect is the helplessness it creates. Henry can protect Eileen, but he can't cure her. You escort her through environments while she grows weaker, watching someone who was once independent unravel into a vessel for the nightmare. In the worst case scenario, she dies during the final confrontation, claimed entirely by the curse. What makes this sequence so haunting is its intimacy. Unlike faceless monsters, Eileen is a friend, an innocent who didn't deserve any of it. Her possession reminds players that Silent Hill isn't just about punishing the guilty. Sometimes it swallows bystanders too, and their slow loss of self is the cruelest horror of all. Corpse flower transformations, Silent Hill F. One of the most grotesque motifs in Silent Hill F is the recurring image of human bodies blooming into flowers. The infection at the center of the story doesn't just kill, it rewrites flesh, turning skin into petals, bone into stalks, and faces into blossoms. These corpse flowers are scattered throughout the game, and each one carries a sense of horror that's both beautiful and revolting. The first time players encounter one, the shock comes from the detail. A body lies twisted on the ground, but instead of decay, brilliant red and white flowers burst from its chest cavity. The petals pulse as though still alive, suggesting the transformation isn't a natural end but a lingering state between human and plant. Later, the environment becomes littered with these hybrids, creating entire rooms where corpses line the walls like gardens of suffering. What makes this disturbing isn't just the gore, it's the perversion of nature. Flowers usually symbolize purity, life, or even mourning. Here they become the final stage of infection, stripping victims of identity and repurposing them as decoration for Silent Hill's cruelty. The sight of a friend or villager you knew now standing frozen, their face replaced with a blossom, leaves a mark no monster can. The corpse flower transformations also carry a thematic weight. They represent the loss of agency, of self. In Silent Hill, death isn't peaceful, it's another way to be consumed. And in Silent Hill F, that consumption is permanent, leaving behind something horrifyingly beautiful that will never let the victim be forgotten. Wedding Massacre Reveal, Silent Hill F. Late in Silent Hill F, one of the most chilling narrative twists arrives with the Wedding Massacre reveal. What begins as a traditional ceremony steeped in Japanese folk aesthetics unravels into a grotesque slaughter. Hinako, bound to the fungal infection and her deep trauma, becomes the center of a tragedy that consumes everyone present. The reveal comes in fragments, blood-slicked tatami mats, shattered ornaments, guests reduced to silent corpses entwined with red tendrils. Players eventually piece it together. What should have been a day of family and celebration dissolved into mass death, orchestrated by forces that twisted love and ritual into carnage. The horror deepens with the post-credits police report, which frames the event clinically, stripping away mystery to confirm that what you witnessed wasn't just symbolic, it was a massacre with dozens dead. What makes this disturbing isn't only the gore, it's the desecration of something sacred. Weddings are supposed to represent unity and hope. Here, Silent Hill uses the occasion as a stage for corruption, showing how even the purest rituals can be rewritten into nightmares. The stark contrast between the white garments, the smiling guests, and the fungal rot swallowing them cements the sequence as one of the franchise's most devastating. Players and reviewers alike singled this out as a moment that lingers long after the credits. It's not shock value, it's thematic cruelty, turning joy into bloodshed, and leaving the player with an ending that feels like Silent Hill at its most merciless. The Shiramuku bridal entity, Silent Hill F. The climax of Silent Hill F delivers one of the most unsettling boss encounters in the series, the Shiramuku bridal entity. Drawing from traditional Japanese wedding imagery, this figure takes the white kimono, normally a symbol of purity and new beginnings, and twists it into a nightmare. Instead of elegance, the bridal robes flow like shrouds, soaked in red fungal veins that pulse and writhe as though alive. The entity embodies everything Hinako's story has built toward: trauma, expectation, and ritual, all merged into a single grotesque image. Its form blends human and fungus, with gaping holes where features should be, and long, suffocating sleeves that reach out like tendrils. The fight against it feels less like combat and more like a symbolic confrontation with the crushing weight of tradition and family. What makes this moment disturbing is the collision of sacred and corrupt. Weddings in Japanese culture often link the bride's attire to both purity and death. The white kimono can also serve as burial garb. Silent Hill F seizes on that duality, transforming the bride into a figure that is both a promise of union and a harbinger of annihilation. For players, the Shiramuku stands as the ultimate horror of Silent Hill F, not just the loss of body to infection, but the loss of self to expectation. The entity is beautiful in a haunting, ceremonial way, but it's a beauty that smothers, consumes, and erases identity. It's Silent Hill at its most poetic and cruel, closing the story with an image no player can forget: the ghost victims, Silent Hill 4. One of Silent Hill 4's most unnerving mechanics is the introduction of the ghost victims, the lingering spirits of those Walter Sullivan murdered. Unlike standard enemies, these ghosts can't be killed with weapons. They float toward Henry, radiating despair, and drain his health simply by being near him. Their faces are distorted, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they're puppets tugged on invisible strings. What makes them so disturbing isn't just their invulnerability, it's their familiarity. Each ghost has a name, a backstory, and a place in Walter's ritual. They aren't nameless monsters, they're human beings, corrupted and weaponized against the player. Encountering them feels wrong, because the horror comes less from fighting and more from enduring their presence. The longer you remain near them, the more your resources deplete, as if their grief is literally sucking the life out of you. The design is minimalist, yet effective. They groan, stutter, and flicker as they move, passing through walls like death itself. Sometimes they scream suddenly in sharp bursts, breaking the tension with jarring violence. Other times they just hover in silence, watching, a constant reminder of Walter's legacy. Silent Hill has always blurred the line between the supernatural and the psychological, but the ghost victims emphasize inescapable suffering. They don't want to kill Henry, they want to share their torment with him, and the game makes sure the player feels every second of that draining despair. The Butcher, Silent Hill Origins. In Silent Hill Origins, Travis Grady encounters one of the series' most unsettling creatures, the Butcher. At first glance, players immediately draw comparisons to Pyramid Head, towering figure, massive cleaver, and a role as executioner within the nightmare. But what makes the Butcher distinct and disturbing in his own right is the brutality with which he treats other monsters. Throughout the game, you stumble upon scenes of the Butcher hacking creatures apart, dismembering them with slow, deliberate swings. These aren't fights, these are punishments. Silent Hill uses him as a mirror, not for the player's guilt, but for Travis's repressed rage and violent tendencies. Where Pyramid Head functions as a judge, the Butcher is more of a butcher in the literal sense. He reduces everything to meat. The first time you witness him at work, there's a sense of dread that sticks long after. Monsters that once terrified you are cut down casually, as if to show that the town's horrors are expendable playthings under his blade. His mask, a rough metal sack fused to his head, strips him of humanity, while his cleaver gleams with gore. He doesn't speak, doesn't taunt, he only slaughters. What's disturbing is the implication that the butcher isn't some outside force. He's tied directly to Travis. As you play, it becomes clear that the butcher is a projection of Travis's suppressed violence, waiting for release. Silent Hill externalizes it, dressing his anger in rusted armor and a cleaver. By the time you confront him directly, the truth is unavoidable. You're fighting a reflection of what you might become. The butcher unsettles not just because of his violence, but because he suggests that even the protagonist isn't safe from Silent Hill's corruption. The sacrificial burning ending, Silent Hill, Shattered Memories. Silent Hill, Shattered Memories is often remembered for its psychological profiling system, but one of its darkest, most disturbing outcomes comes from the sacrificial burning ending. In this variant, Cheryl's therapy sessions collapse into the revelation that Harry Mason was never alive in this version of events. He exists only as an echo she's been chasing. The weight of this realization culminates in a sequence that mirrors Silent Hill 1's primal trauma, immolation. In the cutscene, Harry is engulfed in fire, screaming as flames consume him. It's a direct callback to Alessa's burning, but the framing is more intimate, because by this point the player has spent the entire game embodying Harry, trying to protect Cheryl. Watching him writhe in fire drives home the futility of everything you've done. There is no rescue, no happy reunion, only the ritual of loss repeated. The disturbing power of this ending lies in its emotional cruelty. Unlike earlier games where fire serves a symbolic role tied to cult ritual, here it feels personal. The town forces Cheryl to relive her father's absence by replaying his death in the most violent way possible. For the player, it's a betrayal of agency. Every choice you made still leads to fire. The sacrificial burning ending unsettles, not through gore, but through inevitability. It shows that Silent Hill will always bring its characters back to the same wound, no matter how the details change. And by placing you directly in Harry's perspective as he burns, the game ensures you share his helplessness in full. The amniotic pod creatures, Silent Hill Homecoming. Silent Hill Homecoming may not be the most beloved entry in the series, but it delivers some of its most unsettling enemy designs, especially the amniotic pod creatures. These monsters appear as twisted, fleshy sacs that sway and convulse, their surfaces pulsing like living wounds. Inside, you can just make out distorted human forms curled up, as though trapped in an endless gestation cycle. When the pods rupture, the creatures inside emerge with shrieks, their bodies half-formed and malformed, as if they were dragged out of a womb too early. The connection to birth and miscarriage is unavoidable, tying directly into the game's themes of corrupted family and broken parental bonds. The way they lunge at Alex, screaming and clawing, makes it feel like you're being attacked by something that was never meant to be alive in the first place. The disturbing part isn't just the design, it's the symbolism of failed creation. Shepherd's Glen is a town built on sacrifice, where families give up their children to maintain a twisted pact. The amniotic pods serve as grotesque reminders of that cycle, bodies meant to be sacrificed but instead left in limbo, never born, never dead. The sound design amplifies the horror. Wet squelches and muffled cries leak from the pods as you approach, making every encounter feel wrong before the fight even begins. They aren't just enemies, they're failed children, victims of a ritual that reduces life to a commodity. The amniotic pod creatures disturb because they embody Silent Hill's cruelest theme, that innocence and birth can be corrupted as easily as death, leaving behind forms that are neither human nor monster, but something heartbreakingly in between. The Boogeyman ending Silent Hill Downpour. In Silent Hill Downpour, Murphy, Pendleton's fate is shaped by the choices you make throughout the game. Among the possible outcomes, the Boogeyman ending stands out as one of the most disturbing. In this version, Murphy is forced to wear the executioner's hood and assume the role of the Boogeyman, Silent Hill's embodiment of punishment. The scene is simple but devastating. Murphy, once a prisoner trying to escape guilt and injustice, becomes the very monster he feared. The heavy helmet drops over his head, obscuring his humanity, and the massive sledgehammer falls into his hands. The camera lingers, showing him transformed into an archetype rather than a man. There's no resistance, no protest. Silent Hill erases his identity, rewriting him as its executioner. What makes this ending so disturbing is its finality. In most Silent Hill games, monsters like Pyramid Head or the Boogeyman are projections of guilt and trauma, figures meant to punish the protagonist. Here, Murphy doesn't just face them, he becomes one. The implication is that the cycle of punishment never ends. Silent Hill doesn't forgive, it recycles. Every victim is just one step away from being molded into the next tormentor. It's a cruel inversion of the player's expectations. Instead of liberation or redemption, Murphy's journey concludes with total loss of self. He's no longer a character with a story. He's a symbol, doomed to enforce the same suffering he once endured. The Boogeyman ending disturbs not because of gore or spectacle, but because it suggests a terrifying truth. In Silent Hill, guilt doesn't get resolved. It gets repurposed, ensuring the nightmare continues forever. The cradle of enchantments, Silent Hill F. Silent Hill F is full of fungal body horror, but one of its most disturbing set pieces comes with the cradle of enchantments, a chamber overtaken by the parasite's growth, where entire groups of people appear fused into a single mass of fungus and flesh. The walls pulse as though alive, covered in roots that once were veins, and within them you can see twisted faces frozen mid-scream. The horror here is less about combat and more about witnessing assimilation. These people aren't just killed, they're absorbed, their identities erased as they become part of the parasite's ecosystem. Flowers bloom grotesquely from mouths and eyes, giving the chamber a sickly beauty that makes it even harder to look at. The scene echoes Silent Hill's recurring theme that death in this world is rarely final, it's transformation, often into something worse. Players describe this as one of the most wrong sequences in F because it combines natural imagery with undeniable suffering. Unlike a corpse flower left to stand alone, the cradle traps its victims together, suggesting they are aware of one another even in their final moments. The environment groans as if the mass is still breathing, leaving players unsure whether the victims are alive, dead, or in some liminal state in between. What makes this scene resonate is the way it reframes the parasite as more than a disease. It's a community of horror, binding people together into an eternal, unwanted union. Silent Hill doesn't just kill, it fuses, and in doing so, it ensures that no victim ever truly escapes. The room's peephole scene, Silent Hill 4. One of the most unsettling aspects of Silent Hill 4 is how it strips away the player's sense of safety inside apartment 302. At first, the room feels like a sanctuary. Locked doors, no monsters, just a small space to breathe. But the game begins corrupting even that, and nowhere is it more disturbing than in the peephole sequence. Henry can look through the hole in his wall at his neighbor Eileen's apartment. Early on, this voyeuristic mechanic seems harmless. even comforting. You're simply checking in on a friendly face, but as the nightmare deepens, the view turns sinister. Strange figures begin appearing. Sometimes it's Walter Sullivan himself, standing unnaturally still, watching. Other times it's inexplicable shadows, distorted movements that don't belong to anyone. The disturbing part isn't what you see, it's the implication that something is watching back. The longer you play, the more the peephole feels less like a one-way window and more like a shared space. The moment you realize you're not spying, but participating, the room stops feeling safe altogether. Players often describe this as one of the scariest moments in the game, not because of loud scares, but because it weaponizes intimacy. Eileen's apartment should be ordinary, but Silent Hill twists it into a stage for paranoia. The peephole becomes a symbol of how the nightmare erases privacy, turning even the act of observation into corruption. It's a reminder that in Silent Hill, nowhere is safe, not even your home, not even the spaces where you thought you were in control. Mannequin Room Ambush, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is filled with disturbing creatures, but one of the most infamous encounters happens inside a seemingly ordinary apartment room, the Mannequin Ambush. At first, the space appears empty except for a few mannequins posed in the corners. Their design is already unsettling. Double sets of legs fused together, no arms, no head, no face, just a warped body that denies identity. The moment turns when Pyramid Head appears, dragging his massive blade, and pins a mannequin to the wall in a violent act of assault. James and the player are forced to watch from behind a barred gate, completely powerless to intervene. When Pyramid Head finishes, he notices James and stalks toward him, sending players into panic. This scene disturbs for several reasons. First, it strips away agency. You can't fight, you can't escape, you can only witness. Second, the mannequins are not human, but their humanoid form makes the violence feel sexual, invasive, and deeply uncomfortable. It's Silent Hill weaponizing suggestion rather than explicit detail, leaving the player's imagination to fill the gaps. But the most haunting part is its symbolism. The mannequins are reflections of James's repressed sexuality, faceless bodies reduced to objects. Pyramid Head's assault isn't just random, it's the town forcing James to confront the darkest side of his desires. The violence is staged as performance, a reminder that James is not just a witness, but a participant in the guilt the town exposes. It's a short moment, but it lingers because it shows that Silent Hill doesn't just terrify with monsters, it terrifies with what it makes you watch and what it makes you remember about yourself. The Screamer Children, Silent Hill Homecoming. One of the most unsettling enemy types in Silent Hill, Homecoming is the Screamer, childlike monsters that attack Alex throughout Shepherd's Glen. At first glance, they appear vaguely human. Small frames, tattered clothing, long hair hiding their faces, but the moment they open their mouths, the illusion breaks. They unleash a shrill, distorted scream that disorients the player, echoing like a child's cry, twisted into a weapon. The design is subtle but effective. Their bodies look like malnourished children, but their movements are jerky and feral, more like animals than people. When they rush at you in packs, their screams overlap into a cacophony that's hard to endure. They aren't just enemies to fight, they're representations of the town's cycle of sacrifice, suggesting children transformed into monsters by the weight of tradition and violence. What makes the Screamers especially disturbing is the implication behind their existence. Shepherd's Glen is a community where children are ritually sacrificed to maintain a pact, and the Screamers embody that twisted legacy. They're not faceless monsters born from nowhere, they're echoes of innocent lives warped into instruments of torment. The horror deepens when players notice the detail in their design, the faint outlines of school uniforms, the way their shrieks resemble both pain and rage. They feel like victims first, enemies second, which makes every encounter emotionally heavier than a normal fight. By turning children, symbols of innocence, into shrieking predators, Homecoming amplifies Silent Hill's central theme, that no one, not even the most innocent, is safe from corruption. The screamers don't just attack your health bar, they attack your sense of morality, forcing you to cut down what might once have been children to survive. The Flesh Room, Silent Hill 3. Deep within Silent Hill 3, Heather encounters one of the game's most viscerally disturbing environments, the Flesh Room. Unlike the usual rusted metal and crumbling brick of the other world, this chamber looks alive. The walls pulse with veins, slick with blood, their surfaces textured like raw muscle. The entire space feels like the inside of a body, wet, claustrophobic, and suffocating. What makes the Flesh Room so unsettling is its immediacy. It doesn't just suggest horror, it overwhelms you with it. Every surface oozes, every sound is organic, from squelches underfoot to the low, rhythmic thumping that resembles a heartbeat. The effect is that Heather and the player are swallowed into something that isn't a place anymore, but a living organism. You're no longer walking through a nightmare town, you're walking inside a nightmare body. Symbolically, the Flesh Room ties directly to Heather's role as Alessa's reincarnation and the cult's obsession with birthing a god. The environment mirrors womb imagery, but corrupted and grotesque. Instead of nurturing life, the space feels like it devours it. Every detail reinforces the sense that Heather's body and her fate are not her own, but something the cult has claimed. Players often rank this area as one of the most disturbing in the series because it strips away Silent Hill's usual ambiguity. There's no question of symbolism here. You're standing inside flesh, surrounded by blood, trapped in a living nightmare. It's Silent Hill at its most visceral, turning the environment itself into a grotesque reminder of the horrors of control, birth, and corruption. The cult's ritual room, Silent Hill 1. In the original Silent Hill, one of the most disturbing discoveries comes late in the game when Harry Mason finally steps into the cult's ritual chamber beneath the town. Up to that point, players have pieced together bits of the Order's activities, strange symbols, whispered references to sacrifices, Alessa's suffering. But the ritual room lays it all bare. The space is small and suffocating, lit by a harsh glow that illuminates the grotesque details: scorched floors, walls smeared with ritual markings, and altars stained with blood. Chains hang loosely, suggesting victims were bound there before being offered to the cult's god. At the center lies the focus of their obsession: Alessa herself, broken and burned, kept alive in endless torment to serve as the vessel for their deity. The disturbing part isn't just the imagery, it's the banality of evil in the scene. This isn't some abstract nightmare space. It's a man-made chamber, a place the cult built and used deliberately. Every chain, every bloodstain, every rune is evidence of human beings choosing to perpetuate suffering. Unlike the other world's surreal monsters, the ritual room forces you to confront horror as an act of will, not accident. Silent Hill often blurs the line between human cruelty and supernatural terror, but the ritual chamber makes it clear where everything begins: with people. The monsters, the nightmares, the distortions of reality. All of it stems from this single room, where faith was twisted into torture and a child was burned alive. It's a reminder that behind Silent Hill's horrors are human hands, and that truth makes it all the more unbearable. Scarlet boss fight, Silent Hill Homecoming. one of the most haunting sequences in Silent Hill. Homecoming is the battle against Scarlet, a towering porcelain, doll-like monster tied to Dr. Fitch and his daughter, Scarlet. At first glance, the creature appears pristine. Its surface gleams white and smooth, like a statue or a child's toy. But the longer you look, the more wrong it feels. The joints bend at unnatural angles, the face is frozen in a vacant stare, and the proportions are too long, too thin, suggesting fragility that hides something monstrous. The fight begins quietly, but once you damage her porcelain shell, it shatters to reveal raw, blood-soaked flesh beneath. Scarlet's perfect exterior crumbles into a grotesque interior, exposing sinew and gore. Her movements become frantic, spider-like, and her shrieks pierce the air. The transformation mirrors her backstory. Scarlet was sacrificed by her father in a ritual pact, and her monster form is the physical embodiment of both her innocence and her suffering. What makes this encounter disturbing isn't just the design, it's the context. Dr. Fitch explains his ritual act with chilling calm, describing how he killed his daughter for the town's pact. Scarlet's monstrous rebirth forces players to witness the horror of that sacrifice in the most literal way possible. The symbolism cuts deep. Scarlet begins as fragile and perfect, like how parents might idealize their children, but that veneer cracks to reveal the pain of abuse and neglect. The fight isn't simply about survival, it's about facing the unbearable consequences of Shepherd's Glen's twisted traditions. Scarlet lingers in memory because she embodies one of Silent Hill's cruelest truths. Even the purest innocence can be corrupted, shattered, and rebuilt into something horrifying. The Morgue Awakening, Silent Hill Origins. In Silent Hill Origins, one of the most disturbing sequences unfolds when Travis Grady enters the hospital morgue. At first, the scene plays out with the expected creepiness. Rows of body drawers, flickering lights, and the claustrophobic silence that comes with being surrounded by the dead. But the game quickly turns this ordinary horror setting into something far more nightmarish. As Travis explores, several drawers creak open on their own, revealing corpses that look swollen and distorted, their skin gray and waxy. At first they appear still, but then their heads twitch and their limbs jerk unnaturally. One by one, they begin to pull themselves out, not with the speed of traditional monsters, but with the slow, dragging inevitability of something that shouldn't be moving at all. The horror lies in the violation of expectation. Morgues are meant to be places of rest, cold and final. Here, Silent Hill twists the concept into a reminder that death doesn't grant peace, it only invites further torment. The sound design drives it home, the screech of metal drawers sliding open, the thud of dead weight hitting the floor, and the guttural gas of corpses forcing breath back into their ruined lungs. Symbolically, the morgue scene plays on Silent Hill's recurring theme of unresolved suffering. These bodies don't rise as mindless zombies. They awaken as if still bound to their trauma, unable to leave even in death. Travis isn't just fighting monsters. He's surrounded by people the town has refused to release. It's a small moment in the series, but one of the most disturbing, because it delivers a single, chilling message. In Silent Hill, the dead don't rest. They linger, waiting to remind the living of the nightmare. Gillespie House Flashback, Silent Hill Origins. One of the most disturbing narrative reveals in Silent Hill Origins comes during the Gillespie House flashbacks, where Travis learns the truth about Alessa's childhood. The house itself is steeped in dread, dark corners, scattered occult paraphernalia, and the faint smell of smoke baked into the walls. But it's what the flashbacks show that unsettles most. The unimaginable abuse Alessa endured at the hands of her own mother, Dahlia. Through fragmented visions, Travis witnesses scenes of Dahlia forcing Alessa into ritual spaces, surrounding her with sigils and burning incense as she prepares the girl for sacrifice. There are glimpses of shouting, of Alessa cowering, of fire already licking at the edges of her bed. These memories don't play out as clean-cut scenes. They feel jagged, like broken pieces of a trauma that the town itself is replaying. What makes this sequence so disturbing is how ordinary the setting feels. The Gillespie home isn't a dungeon or cult temple, it's just a house, a place that should have been safe for a child. The horror comes from the reminder that Silent Hill's nightmare begins with human cruelty, not monsters. The other world only exists because of what was done inside these walls. The flashbacks also reframe the entire series. Every monstrous birth, every cult ritual, every warped nightmare traces back to this house and one child's suffering. It isn't the supernatural that first corrupted Silent Hill. It was a mother's choice to sacrifice her daughter. The Gillespie house flashback is disturbing because it strips away abstraction. It isn't about symbols or monsters. It's about watching a child betrayed in the one place she should have been safe. And that makes the rest of Silent Hill's horrors feel inevitable. Hanging Prisoners, Silent Hill, The Arcade. While Silent Hill, The Arcade isn't part of the mainline series, it contributes one of the franchise's most unsettling visuals, the Hanging Prisoners sequence. Unlike the symbolic corpses in Midwitch School, these figures are grotesquely detailed, their bodies bound in ropes or chains, swaying from gallows-like structures that line the walls. Some twitch faintly, suggesting they're not fully dead, while others remain still, silent warnings suspended in endless torment. Because the arcade is an on-rail shooter, the horror comes from what you're forced to do. You move through hallways where these bodies hang at eye level, their faces obscured by sacks or stretched skin, leaving you to wonder who they once were. Occasionally a prisoner lurches, reaching out as if begging for help, before collapsing into silence again. It's a moment where you aren't just fighting monsters. You're moving through a gallery of suffering. What makes this so disturbing is how it ties into Silent Hill's obsession with punishment and execution. The imagery of hanging recalls the town's history of being a place where criminals were judged and killed, a theme that recurs across multiple games. But here the bodies aren't symbolic. They're raw, unrelenting, and presented in sheer numbers. It feels less like an isolated punishment and more like mass execution, leaving the player surrounded by death. Even though the arcade is often dismissed as a side entry, this sequence resonates because it strips Silent Hill of subtlety. It confronts players with the reality that behind every monster is a victim, and sometimes the town doesn't bother disguising that truth. It just hangs the bodies in plain view, leaving you to walk among them.